Welcome to this online session in the African Studies Seminar series. My name is Rijk van Dijk. I'm a staff member of the African Studies Center, and I'm very happy to be able to welcome Professor Eva Spies from the University of Bayreuth. She's also involved in the African Studies program there at that university, with whom the African Studies Center has got close and intensive working relations. So that's an additional and happy factor in being able to welcome Professor Eva Spies to this session of this morning. Professor Spies is an anthropologist and a specialist in the study of religion in various parts of Africa, especially West Africa, Niger. Which will also be part of our presentation of today. We have also been working together, which has been nice, also in the context of one of the themes that she has been developing in her work, entitled Religious Engineering, also the topic of her talk today. I'm also very happy about the fact that she has been a product of a number of universities, well-known universities in Germany, of which I would particularly like to mention one of my favorite universities, which is the University of Tübingen, one of the oldest universities in Germany. And if you ever have an opportunity to visit the University of Tübingen, I would definitely like to recommend that you would do so. So without further ado, let me ask Professor Eva Spies to take the floor. She will talk to her topic for today for about 45, perhaps 50 minutes or so, after which there will be time for questions until 12:30. I will be moderating the session, and I will be taking questions in several rounds, hoping that as many as possible from all of you will be able to raise a question if you so like. So once more, welcome, Eva, and please take the floor. We are looking forward to your talk for today.
Okay, thank you very much, Rijk. Thank you for the kind invitation. I'm honored to speak here, and thank you for your very kind introduction. What I want to do today is to introduce the concept of religious engineering and put it up for discussion. Because our thinking and working with the concept is still in progress, and I'm very much looking forward to your comments and questions on this. With my colleague Paula Schrode, we developed the concept as a heuristical tool to analyze diverse projects of transformation, which in one way or the other refer to religion. And we use the concept as a basic conceptual frame in the ongoing research project on religious engineering in Niger. So with this lecture, I would like to introduce religious engineering as a concept that makes it possible to take a research-oriented look at a wide variety of projects of transformation, which somehow refer to religion, without categorizing these projects a priori as projects of modernization, development, or religious reform, and thus without classifying them a priori as religious, political, or economic projects. Rather, I hope to show that with the help of the concepts, projects can be analyzed in terms of how religious, political, or economic references and differentiations are done or undone in and through transformative projects and practices, and how thus ultimately the social realities that count as transformation or as religion are constituted in interaction. I will share my screen to show you the outline of the presentation and also the following slides. Can you see everything now? Yes, okay, so let me go down. So I will first introduce the empirical groundings, so to say, of the concept of religious engineering. And by the way, this is, the full title of the presentation is Religious Engineering, a Practice Approach to Religious or Projects of Social Transformation. So I will start saying a little bit about why we came up with this idea to talk about religious engineering. And I will first introduce the material before explaining the notion of religious engineering a little bit further and in more detail, and then discussing how we use it in our research project, and then also why we see transformative projects or projects of transformation also as ethical projects. So a bit on the background. So I'm interested so I have a background also in religious studies and in anthropology, and I am interested in, for many years now, in the anthropology of development, and which means that I'm interested in the ethnographic study of actors, projects, practices in international development. For some years now, I also work on Pentecostal charismatic churches, which were created by African prophets or church fathers, and which evangelize in other African countries. So, for example, the Nigerian Winners Chapel doing mission work in Madagascar, or the Lighthouse Chapel International from Ghana doing mission work in Niger. It turned out that these two fields of research are much closer to each other than I ever thought. For me, the notion of religious engineering is a way to work on the relations and overlaps between these two fields of interest. And I want to give you two short examples what made me think about these overlaps and how I think about the connections and why I come up with this idea of engineering or religious engineering some years ago. And Reich has been part of the, let's say, starting workshop where we discussed this concept first in, I think, 2016. One point or one connection between these two fields of interest of mine is an ongoing policy discourse on the connection between religion and development. Since the beginning of the 2000s, international development policy and development studies show an increased interest in the connections between religion and development. It started with then World Bank President James Wolfenson's initiative, the World Faith Development Dialogue, which resulted in a flood of affirmative, applied, and later also ethnographic and historical work on the connections between so-called religious values and religious actors in development work. It was only in 2014 when Gerd Müller started his job as a minister in the ministry or in the Federal Department for Economic Cooperation and Development that this kind of discourse was taken up in Germany. And so ever since he engages in this discourse and promotes the involvement of religious actors in development cooperation. Religious actors are understood by the department as an asset to development work, as they promise to improve aid effectiveness. Moreover, the publications of the ministry imply the idea that the choice of the best religious cooperation partners has an additional advantage. This is to support those religious communities which are committed to the same values and goals as German or global development policy. So there is not only the idea to put development right by including religious actors, but also to form and influence the religious landscape in particular countries by supporting some actors and not others. Both strategies are presented as values-based and thus also as ethical projects. And the quote you see here is taken out of one of the brochures of the Ministry of the Federal Ministry of Economic Development and Economic Cooperation and Development. And what I think is my emphasis here, and I think this what I'm interested in is this: we want to and we can. So there is this idea that there is something to be done, and the actors involved, the agencies involved, have the capacity and the power to do something. So,
sorry, Eva.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but if you mean to operate your PowerPoint, at least on my side, I'm only seeing the first slide. So if
I'm sorry.
If you mean that you have already moved on in your PowerPoint, you may need to see how you. Yes. Thank you very much.
Better? Yeah. See. Okay. Sorry. So this was the quote I mentioned by the minister, where he says, "This is why we want to and we can strengthen the potential that religion offers for development." And this is so to say, the goals of the official is to enhance aid effectiveness and so on. And what is also implied in these brochures, in the publications of the Department of BMZ, is that religion is not only a tool for pursuing development, and in doing so differentiate between religious actors worthy and unworthy of support, and thus differentiate between religions and religious values which are allowed to enter the secular political frame and those which need to be kept outside. So of course, what is mentioned here, what is written here on the PowerPoint in blue color is what I think are the additional goals. Of course, this is not the official thing you read in the papers, but this is somehow implied by the idea that to pursue the goal, the ministry has to choose the best religious groups as cooperation partners, the best partners. This is the initiative can also be read as a way to differentiate between legitimate and illegitimate religion by choosing the best or the right cooperation partners. The second connection that struck me in my empirical work are the efforts of African Pentecostal churches, connections between my fields of interest and fields of research. These are the efforts of African Pentecostal churches, not only to form subjectivities, but also society or Africa, and actually the world according to their Christian vision. That is, the huge Pentecostal churches formulate ideas of social involvement, develop plans about what the near future should look like, and how they want to pursue their aims, especially the aim to introduce and disseminate a certain Christian lifestyle, as Erika Bronstein says this, a lifestyle which touches all spheres of life. This transformation of individual lives, societies, and Africa, and finally the world, is understood as holistic transformation, where individual life-changing religious conversion experiences also imply or are followed by economic, social, and political change. The churches present their visions and activities as an overall project of change, and their founders and charismatic leaders or prophets they present them as prophets or leaders who work in a conscious and well thought out way and active way toward the future shape of society. So a huge issue in this discussion is the question of leadership. You can find this in most of the African Pentecostal churches today. And the idea of raising a new generation of leaders that are able to transform society. The individual societies where the leaders come from, but ultimately also Africa and the world as a whole. A very important issue or tool to do this change or to work on this change is the field of education, to work on the future shape of society. So here you see an institute, the Institut de Leadership Chrétien. It's an institute for creating and raising a new generation of leaders, and this is part of a Pentecostal church the Église Évangélique Shine. It's a Malagasy Pentecostal church, but a church which is very closely connected to the network of Doug Howard Mills Ministries, so what used to be known as the Lighthouse Chapel International from Ghana. So they are in very close connection. So the idea is that God is a planner, and those people working for him, his prophets, are also should be planners too. LCE is an institute with the idea to raise new leaders. This means to teach specific values and a specific mentality. And you see this mentality somehow illustrated in the icons they use on their website. These icons here. It's a mentality to teach people to be determined, to act goal-oriented, to act purposeful. And at the same time, they want to somehow teach or imply specific skills, like also you see this here. It's going from actually English classes, which is very important in Madagascar, to marketing skills and business skills and so on. So it's really about teaching people, educating people in all spheres of life, and somehow generating or creating a kind of possibility mentality, a notion another church founder, David Oyedepo from Winners Chapel, uses. The possibility mentality, so the idea that that people can do something and that they have the capacity and the power to change something. And they also, of course, with these kind of educational institutions, they provide the concrete steps and strategies how to put certain ideas and into practice. So education and leadership, Pentecostal churches put education and leadership training into use to pursue the dissemination of a transformative Pentecostal lifestyle. So today, many Pentecostal churches actively design their practices according to the overall aim to save the world for Jesus and to conceive the world, to convince the world, of their lifestyle. A Pentecostal lifestyle, which involves every aspect of life and society and does not exclude politics or public social engagement. For authors like Miller and Yamamori, this maybe fall in the category of what they call progressive Pentecostals. Pentecostals who are socially committed and actively involved in shaping and thus improving their social environment. I just wanted to give you these two short examples, the German development policy and Pentecostal churches, to show different projects of transformation where religion and the quest for change are connected and mutually influence each other, however, in different ways. These projects are not only based on schemes for creating a better world and ideas about what needs to be changed, in which direction, but also involve very concrete activities, which are again based on the notion that certain agencies are able to plan change and implement transformations through concrete practices. In both cases, a better world and otherwise, as Borinala says, is not only envisioned, rather transformative activities are developed to actively produce the change toward a different future. So these are some ideas and cases which brought us to think about religious engineering. And you see, so the connection here, what I wrote here in blue color, that there is a project of religious and individual transformation, which is closely connected to social transformation. And in the case of the development policy, there is this project of development of economic and social transformation, which is closely connected to religion by choosing religious cooperation partners. Paula Schrode and I understand religious engineering as a heuristical tool to analyze transformative practices which refer in one way or the other to religion, just as the cases I mentioned. Religious engineering allows us to study the similarities and interrelatedness of practices we find in seemingly different fields, such as development cooperation, African Pentecostal Churches, but also Turkish charity or radical activist movements like Boko Haram or Salafism. I give you a short quote from a recent publication from Paula and me, and I read it to you. So, the notion of religious engineering refers to active and conscious ways of working on the future shape of a given society, of individuals or the world, where the transformative projects refer to religious resources, such as religious traditions, practices, identities, or institutions. At the same time, the concept alludes to active transformations of religious traditions and self-understanding that are spurred on by specific projects of social or individual improvement. So our assumption is that religious engineering practices equally shape projects of change and shape religious traditions and self-understandings to which the engineers or the projects refer to. So it's always these two sides of engineering. Remember Minister Müller trying to form good religion with development cooperation and the Pentecostal Churches, which brings together Christian ethos and the creation of new leaders. The concept helps us to go beyond the discussion about religious actors in development and also to consider projects of transformation that are understood as alternatives to so-called Western development or as independent from development discourse at all. And at the same time, it helps us to take a look at projects of transformation which are pursued by religious actors without narrowing down these projects to the so-called religious sphere and or to projects of individual religious conversion. Rather, religious engineering invites us to look at the practices in and through which boundaries between religion and non-religion emerge, connections between religion and transformation materialize, and moral demands and claims evolve. A practice approach, as I mentioned in the title of this talk, supports a processual view on the field of research. It allows an analysis of different projects of transformation, improvement, or change without limiting oneself to pre-established concepts of religion, secularity, or development. So why a practice approach? It is, of course, central that engineers' activities are oriented towards change that is and otherwise is considered possible and necessary. Remember the possibility mentality mentioned by Pentecostal Churches. However, our focus is not so much on plans or grand schemes or imaginaries of a different future, which means the hope for results. Rather, we are interested in the actual things people do, the steps they take to put things right, and the effects these activities have with regard to notions of change, transformation, and religion. So, for example, choosing the correct or the right cooperation partners, or establishing universities and educational facilities. Engineers see their activities as effective methods or tools. However, it does, of course, not mean that the projects achieve their goals and the activities show the intended consequences. A focus on practices thus means not to think and evaluate plans and activities by their intended outcome, but to study the actual work done. Focusing on practices, and for us also means to acknowledge the emerging character of the realities in question. Neither do we take religion or change as given social realities, nor can we assume that the imagined ideal, the plan, or the values are given and only need to be implemented or realized. Opting for a processual and practice approach means to focus on schemes, categories, activities, and ethical stances that emerge in and through interaction. So the aim of a practice approach is to focus on the emergence of social realities and the emergence of differentiations and categorizations in interaction. And a second aim is to question the often pronounced clear causality between ideal action and outcome, which is usually a critique when you talk of engineering, so that people think there is a clear line of steps from plan to outcome. And of course, when you look at practices, you come to question this clear causality. So we rather study how ideals, values, and aims become and emerge and mutually influence each other while working with and toward them. There's a very nice a quote of John Law talking about engineering. He says, the world has the nasty habit of being more complicated than it is imagined by those who seek to put it right. It has a nasty habit of escaping our schemes and to make it better. So of course, engineering does not mean that everything happens as planned. But as I said, this is why we choose to look at practices to see what does happen actually. We thus focus on the practices of doing change or doing religion or doing ethics. Unlike current praxeological approaches, however, I understand practices or this notion of doing here as a broad umbrella term that encompasses actor-led conscious action and performative acts, as well as everyday practices and activities. Both forms may include co-activities of non-human participants and the material world, as sociologist Rhissa calls this. This means engineers can be individuals, groups, or organizations, and all other agencies that participate in their activities, such as, of course, the Holy Spirit in the Pentecostal case, or ancestors or objects like, of course, money and technologies or weapons. So this is an aspect which is especially important. These kind of co-activities is especially important when it comes to the question how actors legitimate their activities or their authority to act. To learn about alternative futures and projects of transformation, we cannot stop at plans or expected outcomes. We rather have to go via the practices and the agencies which are involved in processes of world making, and this, of course, is also very specific to the particular cultural and historical contexts. So why now religious engineering? We understand the practices as forms of religious engineering if the tools and measures that the engineers choose refer to religious practices, teachings, or agencies, or if the goals themselves are related to religion. As shown with the example of the German Federal Ministry, religious engineering can also be pursued by engineers who do not conceive of themselves as being religious, such as development institutions, but who aim, for example, at engaging with and transforming religious traditions. Thus, engineering efforts are not exceptional for us, neither in public policy, in the field of development, nor in the field of religion. These efforts are neither good or bad as such. We rather see them as part of the human impulse to somehow get life under control and shape it. However, as engineering practices are about regulating transformation processes, about critique, and of an actual situation and about taking action, they always also imply a struggle over forms and relations of power, about the legitimacy to act and over ethical questions. So this summary mirrors the current state of our conceptual thinking about religious engineering. Many things have to be clarified in and through research, and we are trying to do this in the research project Religious Engineering, as you see the title here, Religious Engineering, the Making of Moralities, Development and Religion in Niger. This is a project in the context of this cluster of excellence, Africa Multiple, Reconfiguring African Studies here at the University of Bayreuth. And we have, so it's together with Paula Schrode and Mahaman Tidjani Alou from Niger, and 2 doctoral students from Niger who are also around here today, Hamissou, Rhissa, Achaffert, and Ibrahim, Bachir, Abdoulaye. So in the next part, I will describe this project yeah. I don't think I have to tell you about the challenges of ethnographic and empirical research these days. The project actually started with the beginning of 2020, and until the day we were not able to conduct the kind of ethnographic research in Niger we had planned, because we were not allowed to travel as anyone else. So I cannot offer you deep ethnographic insights, but rather only bits and pieces of an ongoing study. Niger has always been a state where many actors with different interests intervene with different methods to make a change or to improve a situation that is deemed unsatisfactory. Be it questions of poverty or questions of ecology or insecurity and many other topics that spurred this idea of changing or improving or developing. In addition to the Nigerian state, there are, for example, numerous civil society organizations, individuals, and multitude of national and international and transnational actors, like other states, like missionaries, like religious groups or development organizations. In recent years, new actors appeared as, for example, China, Turkey as states, European military and money to secure Europe's borders in the Sahel, armies of the G5 Sahel group, as well as new local Islamic actors and transnational Islamic networks, like for so-called jihadist organizations. So we have a diversification of actors, a diversification of projects of transformation, and also a diversification of claims to improve and to change. In our research, we take the work of national and international Pentecostal churches, of Turkish humanitarian organizations and local Salafi associations, as well as governmental agencies in Niger as a starting point to examine how transformation is imagined and most of all done. And we want to learn more about how certain actors want to transform what they perceive of as deficient or unsatisfactory, and also who is addressed, of course. What is the problem actually for these projects of transformation? This way, we look at a wide variety of projects of transformation without categorizing these projects a priori as modernization, development, or religious reform, or classifying them as religious or political. Our assumption is that neither the perception and description of a situation, ethical claims or demands, nor transformative activities are self-contained and isolated from other views, notions, and discourses and practices. So this is why the projects we aim to understand, this is why our project actually is to aim to understand the relational constitution of certain positions, views, practices, and judgments in and through practices. Thus, we do not study laical, Islamic, Christian, or democratic ideals and knowledges and values as given and established guidelines for action, which only wait for implementation. Rather, our focus is on the practices through which ideals, future visions, and ethical judgments are generated and exchanged. So what or who needs to be changed by whom, who has the capability to do this, and who knows the right way. These questions and the many answers given to them are emerging and taking shape in relation to each other. So we look at how the different projects refer to one another, what kind of, let's say, relational practices can we find, like comparing, contesting, rejecting, silencing, ignoring each other. Although we focus on different cases to study forms of religious engineering, and the overall aim is not to treat them as separate projects of transformation, but to understand their interrelations and mutual influences and ask how they gain shape, how aims and methods are emerging, and especially how ethical claims and demands evolve in this meshwork of transformative practices in Niger. We have several case studies, and I shortly want to introduce them. And so those who are here, Hamissou and Ibrahim, you just jump in if I'm not doing it in a good way. So Hamissou, Rhissa, Achaffert project is about a local association with a Salafist orientation and its implicit and explicit visions of an otherwise or of a just society. With processes of democratization since the 1990s, many new local actors also appeared in the public sphere, among them also several Islamic associations. In addition to Islamic NGOs working in the field of international development, there are others who focus on broader questions of and openly contest the laical constitution of the state in Niger, and some of them also promoting an Islamic Republic of Niger. Following the work of Mahaman Idrissa and Abdoulaye Hamissou's project sees Salafi activities in education as central for their thinking and doing change. Actually, similar to Pentecostal focus on raising a new generation of leaders, Salafi activism also focuses on education to prepare, for example, students to be good future leaders who pursue the broader project of re-Islamisation of Niger. Abdoulaye writes in his study about a Salafi group on campus, the Association des étudiants musulmans du Niger à l'Université d'Abdoulaye, à Niamey. And then he says they develop and teach a kind of social curriculum that compromises a set of activities for students in order to change their mindsets, to change their mentalities. And I would like to add also, of course, this implies to change the criteria of ethical judgment and so on. So Islamic activism does not concentrate only on education by chance. Rather, as Pentecostalism, the idea is that Islamic knowledge, behavior, attitudes which are taught to the students trickle down to the rest of society and contribute to re-Islamizing Niger. Moreover, Islamic knowledge is understood as moral knowledge, which provides the basis and substance not only of an individual peer's life, but also for political and social change at large. Sunai describes this fight for Islam, and I quote, as the articulation of a political project designed to decolonize and morally reorder society by rejecting both secular norms and Islamic practices deemed inauthentic. So central to the activities of Salafi organizations which work toward the re-Islamized society is to question Nigerian secularism as it is inscribed in the constitution in Niger as laicity. Working on the future shape of society thus implies not only a redefinition of Islam, but also a redefinition or definition of the religious secular boundary, if not even a dissolution of the distinction between the religious and secular, which means that it is not only necessary to put society right, but also Islam and politics. Hamissou's project focuses on a different Salafi organization than that Sunai writes about. In particular, he will study the question of gender in these Salafist schemes to improve society, but also on the concrete activities undertaken. So the question is which female roles emerge, for example, as a result of increased participation of women in transformative educational activities. Another project, and this is the second you see here on the slide, is the project of Ibrahim, Bachir, Abdoulaye, and also Paula Schrode's work focuses on this, the practices of Turkish non-governmental organizations in Niger. The project studies the ideals and discourses of Turkish NGOs active in Niger and asks how these ideals are translated into practice through humanitarian projects, as well as how beneficiaries perceive the discourses and practices of the NGOs. Further questions refer also to the soft power strategies of Turkey in Niger and the role of the global Muslim Ummah as goal and tool of transformation. Ibrahim studies, for example, a Turkish humanitarian aid foundation called IHH, the Humanitarian Relief Foundation, which is also working in Niger. So other than the local Salafi organizations mentioned above, the NGO consciously refers to the international development discourse, although it sees itself as an Islamic alternative to Western development organizations, ideals, and activities. Founded in 1995, the organization today offers not only emergency relief, but also long-term development aid with the idea of facilitating self-help initiatives. The IHH works in the fields of health and education, digs water wells, and does the usual stuff, let's say, that development organizations do. In addition to this, it offers what is called social and cultural aid, which means supporting the Muslim brothers, for instance, by distributing meat at Tabaski and Kurban, and by this promoting universal brotherhood and, as they say on their website, unchanging values in a changing world. So transformation or transformative practices are not always about changing everything from head to toe, but also introducing unchanging values. Africa is portrayed as a continent of oppressed people by this organization who need to be liberated from neo-colonial structures and mentalities. And the organization sees itself in the position of a pioneer, being able to undertake this task. The discourse of international development is explicitly adopted, but now oriented toward God-given rights and duties. And it seems that the state of Niger is not questioned as radically as by the Salafi organizations, but rather accepted as cooperation partner who needs to be liberated from dependency from, let's say, Western agencies. Mahaman Tidjani Alou, a political scientist from Niger, works exactly on the question of the state and contributes insights into government operations and questions of governmentality. This is, let's say, a third case study. The state not only plays a role in imagining and engineering a certain future, but also in dealing with diverse projects of transformation in Niger and in shaping, rejecting, or adopting ideals of change, reform, or development, which are promoted by these other powers, other actors. As mentioned, the engineering activities of different actors multiplied in recent years, especially of those actors in Niger. The Nigerian state locates in the field of development or religion. A growing group of actors are transnational religious organizations which work in the field of development and or charity. Part of our project is to examine the activities of the state regarding the management of those actors, or the, let's say, the governing of those actors and the negotiating of its own position. It was only in 2010 that a Department of Religious Affairs was created. Here, religion is, for example, managed by the control of religious associations, which are either admitted as religious organizations or associations or not. So by sorting out who has the right to be a religion and a religious association. This is also managed, so diversity is also managed by outlawing religious political parties, for example. At the same time, Tidjani Alou as well as Abdoulaye observe a state in the process of religious conversion to Islam. This was a quote, a state in process of religious conversion to Islam. For both, this is not only mirrored in the creation of a National Islamic Council, we might translate with, but also in the activities like providing prayer places in public buildings, the use of the Quran for swearing in of state officials, or also the unclear positioning of the state after, for example, the Charlie Hebdo attacks on Christian churches in 2015. Thus, so far, the state presents itself as rather undecided between its laical constitution and its support for respectable Islam. Its future shape is open, and the definition of the religious secular boundary very much in flux, I'd say. And so we will see. We now had only this week the final elections for the presidency, and it's open how the new government will position itself. But actually, in the campaign, they voted for continuity. So my own case study now in Niger revolves around African Pentecostal churches in Niamey, as for example, the First Love Church, which is part of the United Denominations originating from the Lighthouse group of churches. This is a network of churches connected by their reference to Doug Howard Mills, the founder of the mega church Lighthouse Chapel International in Ghana. Doug Howard Mills is very well known for his healing Jesus campaigns in African countries, where not only the word of God and deliverance is offered, but also free medical help to the helpless. Sorry, this is a quote. Doug Howard Mills combines his evangelizing efforts with humanitarian activities. Being himself a medical doctor, these activities include building of medical facilities and provision of free medication and medical care, but also the distribution of food. So you see here also the different practices, how to do the work of transformation in a specific context. We hope with the different cases, we can study different aspects and forms of processes, as well as we call religious engineering, that is practices which aim at transformation and in doing so refer to religious traditions, institutions, agencies, or values. As I said, we understand religious engineering as our shared frame of reference, which offers us a way to study projects of transformation that would otherwise be studied separately. The idea is, however, not to have a strict comparison between the cases, but work with a conceptual framework that allows us to look at different activities from the same perspective, and thus also to better identify the interrelationships of these projects of transformation. Without pigeonholing the activities in advance in different categories, such as development, Islamization, politics, NGOization, and thus assessing them to different frames of reference. We want to examine the connections between them. We ask if and how the projects and observed practices emerge in shape and in and through their relations with each other. So this is why we somehow focus on what we call relational practices, like how the projects also refer, or the actors refer to each other. We do, however, not assume that everything is connected to everything, but we think that ethnographic research can help us to see the meshwork of relation that brings about and shapes transformative visions and the activities that are pursued. I see now I'm already 50 minutes. Maybe I give you, if you're okay with this, a short also notion on this notion of doing ethics we work with in the project, and then conclude. That's fine with you?
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, so because this is this kind of making of moralities is a rather central part to our project, because we understand projects of transformation also as ethical projects. That is, projects which include moral judgments and evaluations of a given situation, of the situation to be achieved, the tools to be applied, and the people to be legitimately involved. Especially when it comes to questions of change, moral evaluations, claims, and demands are made, and the question of criteria for such judgments and positionings become central. Projects of transformation always imply ethical questions, such as what counts as bad or unsatisfactory or unjust, and which otherwise or future is better or more just. Whose future vision is rejected or goes unheard? Which means and measures are right or wrong? Is persuasion and teaching better than violence? Who deserves improvement, and who is excluded? Who is allowed to pursue transformation? So religious engineering projects are not only sites of technical or financial struggles, but of course also subject to ethical controversy. Inspired by the ongoing discussion on ordinary or everyday ethics proposed, for example, by Michael Lambeck and Venedas, we understand the ethical as intrinsic to social life and interaction, so as immanent, as Michael Lambeck says. Thus, ethics cannot be relegated to a sphere of experts and their abstract reflections on ethical question, rules, and criteria for judging actions. Rather, questions of value judgment, the criteria involved in the practices of evaluation and justification are part of day-to-day life. This is why, in the context of our research project, we understand the ongoing practice, negotiation, and communication of critique, value judgment, and evaluation criteria as processes of doing ethics. So, see, in this way, doing ethics is for us synonymous with morality. And as Didier Fassin put it, it's about the interactive processes of the moral making of the world. Thus, research on religious engineering and on the relationality of many projects of transformation in Niger does not start with a priori differentiation between what we may call Islamic or Christian or secular ethics, which then meet and clash. So it is about given ethical principles and rules, how moral means and ends are generated and performed. So not to start with something to think it is clear what Islamic ethics is about, or it's clear what Pentecostal ethics is about, but to see how this evolves in the projects and in the kind of relations between the projects. What unites the transformative projects that our research group studies is not only the possibility mentality David Oyedepo mentions, so this mentality of the agencies involved, but also that they can be understood as ethical projects, which are committed to a practice of effort, as Pavinali says. A practice of effort oriented to the transformation or the remaking of the world. And I would like to start with another slide because the new year is still fresh and young, and I show you what Pentecostal mega churches or the charismatic leader of these churches usually do at the beginning of a new year. They somehow declare their visions for the new year, that visions that have been transmitted by the Holy Spirit to them. And so I don't go into the details of this vision, but you see only here some quotations from the Bible, which David Oyedepo, the leader of the Winners Chapel, whose vision this is, deems important and necessary for everyone to take account of or to be aware of. And I translated somehow these notions. So what he says is, and this is very much of what he also calls this possibility mentality, be clear about your goals, prepare and act goal orientated, be patient. So, and do not stop until you've accomplished your task. So with this accomplishing my task for this, I'll stop my presentation here. Thank you very much.